Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Gamecock Central Radio. Will Muschamp midweek press conference today ahead of the Missouri game. Noon kickoff Saturday at Williams-Brice. It'll be on the SEC Network. Emerson Phillips with Collyn Taylor here on GCR. And Collyn, about 25 minutes Muschamp went today, and I was curious to see his demeanor, his attitude at the press conference today, because the presser after the Georgia game was brief. It was evident that Muschamp had more pressing matters on his mind than being at the press conference that week. But today I felt like he was in a pretty good frame of mind. It felt like he had kind of flushed the Kentucky game and was focused on improving this football team and looking ahead to Missouri.
Right, and I think, there were some fiery moments when he was talking about, J.C. Horn and a couple other things. But I think he kind of gets the sense that the pressure's off of him. I think that there's still a lot to play for, but when you're essentially 2 games behind Kentucky and not 3 games behind Georgia, the kind of pressure to go off and play perfect every week's over. So now they're kind of, I don't want to say taking it lighthearted, but they seem a little bit looser than what they were after that Georgia game, which I think will be ultimately a good thing because I don't think they'll play as rigid as they did in those big games that South Carolina fans kind of took exception with. So a lot looser today and seemed to be, like you said, in a pretty good frame of mind.
Yeah, not in a bad mood at all. Clearly not happy with the way things transpired at Kentucky Saturday night. But, again, Muschamp seemed to be looking ahead and trying to focus on what he can do to make this football team better. So Muschamp gave us injury updates on 8 different players, Collyn, and we'll start with Jake Bentley, the Gamecock quarterback. Knee injury suffered against Kentucky, still sore, but did practice today and is probable for the Missouri game.
Right, and I think that's kind of him and Brian Edwards are the 2 guys that you're really looking at as potential, game-changing guys that could miss this week. Muschamp, I think, expects Bentley to play just because he did say probable, and I think he's the same way with Brian Edwards with that ankle sprain. So I think they're going to slow roll him this week, just kind of keep him limited and make sure that they're not putting too much stress on those lingering injuries. Bentley has been in rehab pretty much since they got back from Kentucky, just trying to get right, and Edwards kind of the same way. They're making sure that those guys are as healthy and kind of take as much strain and whatnot away from that knee and that ankle as possible heading into Saturday.
Edwards has got an ankle. He's probable. Muschamp also mentioned Jamias Williams, who did practice on this Tuesday, but no contact for Jam Williams?
Yeah, no contact. He's in a yellow jersey, so they're going to kind of keep him limited, I guess, too, and just rep him and not do any, I guess, overly physical stuff in practice.
Okay, Jacob August is in concussion protocol. JT eBay, the safety, looks like he's out this week. Muschamp said Josh Belk's dealing with an ankle, and he said that DJ Wanham is expected to be back after the bye week. And it looks like Eldridge Thompson is questionable this week as well with a shoulder. And Muschamp said that Chad Terrell practiced today and will play.
Yeah, so I think that's good news for South Carolina. Getting Chad Terrell back, especially when you lose a guy like Ortre Smith. So that's good news for them. And the one the 2 that are really interesting are Eldridge Thompson and Josh Belk, just because we're not sure of the severity of those. Belk hasn't played the last 2 weeks. That ankle injury, and Eldridge Thompson didn't play last week, didn't even travel, with that shoulder. But with eBay, he's out. Muschamp said likely until after the bye week. He'll come back with Wanham if they come back after then. And these injuries are starting to pile up, and this time of year no one's really healthy, but it seems like the Gamecocks are getting a lot of guys that are big impact players that are getting bruised and scraped up heading into a pretty important stretch run for them.
Collyn eBay has been playing a lot at safety, and Muschamp said Nick Harvey, Javon Charleston, and Jalen Dickerson have all repped in his place so far this week, and 1 or more of those 3 could play Saturday against Missouri.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see a lot of different guys take reps, and don't really rule out Jam Williams either, especially if he can come back and get healthy for this Saturday. But I think your top guys, obviously Nick Harvey, and then Javon Charleston has some experience, and R.J. Roderick and Jalen Dickerson are 2 younger guys that don't necessarily know the defense as well as some of the other ones, but have the talent and I guess are a little bit bigger and more physical, kind of different type safeties that the staff's really high on. And I think you'll see maybe some different combinations if things aren't necessarily going South Carolina's way. If, one guy falls, then they can put in another guy that's pretty comparable in talent.
Collyn, as much as Muschamp he talked about Missouri to open the press conference today, but most of the questions from the media focused around things that happened in the Kentucky game. So let's talk about a few of those. Bad penalties or dumb penalties is kind of a topic that the media touched on today. Nobody worded it quite like that. Those are my words, not the media's words that were at the press conference today. But he was asked about the penalty situation, and Muschamp said that it's been addressed, it's being addressed, and he pointed out that South Carolina was the least penalized team in the SEC a year ago, and he said flat out, we're not tolerating it.
Right, and they had a team meeting Monday and kind of talked about it, and TJ Brunson said that Will Muschamp really didn't sugarcoat things in the meeting and in practice today. So the team knows that they need to play a little bit more disciplined, and I think they're kind of getting that message in practice and in meetings this week. But Muschamp said he likes the fiery guys, though. He wants guys that are pretty intense, and I think that you're going to get that this week in a more controlled environment. Because Muschamp mentioned it about last year that they played intense and they just never got penalized for it. So they have to play a smart, fiery brand of defense, and I think you're going to see that this week against Missouri.
And speaking of fiery players, Collyn, Muschamp talked specifically about J.C. Horn, and Muschamp said that he'd rather say whoa than giddy up. And he said that Horn is one of these fiery guys who's excited about playing for South Carolina, and he just needed to dial it back a little bit Saturday.
Yeah, and I think that's just one of those typical freshman mistakes that, a young guy that likes playing football and likes to be out there is going to make, especially, in game 4 of his college career. And Muschamp said that the guys he's been around that have been really good play like J.C. Horn does. He even compared him a little bit to Earl Thomas in the way he plays. So pretty strong comparisons for the freshman when you're talking about some of the best college players to ever play in Earl Thomas. So I think that that's kind of going to be the norm in terms of fieriness. You're going to see a lot more J.C. Horns on the Gamecocks roster because Muschamp said he likes guys like that on his team.
Yeah, that was interesting. Muschamp said, some guys you got to motivate, you got to tell them to giddy up, but others you have to dial them back. You got to say, whoa. And Horn seems to be one of those guys that you have to dial back a little bit. So that was encouraging, I thought, Collyn. Let's talk about drops. Muschamp talked about Samuel and Edwards dropping some balls on Saturday night, and that's just something that we have not seen over the years, Collyn. I just felt like it was just one of those nights where, it was not South Carolina's night, and the drops by Samuel and Edwards, to me, epitomized the whole night more than anything else.
Yeah, and he even mentioned it today. He said, in Deebo Samuel's now, 4 years on campus, how many dig routes has he caught? And Deebo said a lot, and he said, it's one drop. It's only, with Edwards too, it's only one drop down the field. So These guys have made big catches before, and no matter what he says on the sidelines afterwards, that he still has faith in them and things like that. So he's not really mad about it. And I think that you'll see the receivers kind of get more involved this week, and even Deebo said that they've been taking extra reps on, the catching machines and different things like that. So they'll be ready. And I think that they know that that's a bit of a point of focus for them, is making sure they come down with it before trying to make a big play.
Yeah, it's just one of those nights. And Muschamp said that nobody hurts more than these guys do, than Samuel and Edwards do, because they drop those passes. Nobody hurts about it more than them. And he said, let's forget about it and let's move on. So that's what we'll do here. Gamecock Central Radio, Emerson Phillips with Collyn Taylor talking about Will Muschamp's midweek press conference today. A couple of other interesting items here, Collyn. Muschamp talked about the need to improve first down efficiency. He said the Gamecocks are trying to get in 2nd and 7 yards or less after the first down play. That's what they want to be in, 2nd and 7 or less. And he said they need to be there 60% of the time. And right now they're only there through 4 games about 48% of the time. That's a pretty good ways off the mark there, Collyn.
Right, and I think that they addressed it last year too when they struggled on 3rd down. And when you play well on 1st down, they usually set you up really well for 2nd and 3rd and moving the chain. So their big goal really isn't 3rd down conversions; it's getting enough on 1st down, and that comes with better blocking on the offensive line. That comes with better routes and Bentley finding guys. And more intermediary routes, because if you get in a 2nd and 10, that puts you in a 3rd and long, and it's really hard to consistently convert on third down and 6 or 7 yards compared to a 3rd and 2, 3, or 4. So I think that when you're looking at it in terms of restructuring the offense, it's not really a full restructure, but it's running more quick routes and things that get you 3 or 4 or 5 yards on first down. The way you can take your shots on second down, knowing that third down is going to be a lot easier to pick up when you get enough yards on first or second down.
All right, so Muschamp did talk about Missouri. He opened with a statement about Missouri before he started taking questions, and obviously talk about the Tigers begins with their quarterback, Drew Lock, who a lot of people are really enamored with. The Gamecocks have actually had pretty good success against him the last 2 years. Collyn, get you to talk about that. And Muschamp went out of his way to point out that Missouri runs the football a lot better this year with Crockett and Roundtree, their 2 running backs. And he mentioned that they've got 2 tight ends who are 6'6", about 250. So Muschamp said good things about the Missouri offense. He talked about Derek Dooley, the new offensive coordinator. And when he talked about the Missouri defense, he talked specifically about Terry Buckner and how good he is up front for the Tigers.
Yeah, and, I think a lot like with Kentucky with Benny Snell, Missouri runs their offense through Drew Lock. He's a first-round NFL talent. He's got a cannon for an arm. And Missouri runs that up-tempo offense that South Carolina likes to run at times this year. And Missouri's been doing it a lot longer than South Carolina has. So the key to stopping that, and South Carolina's been good about that the last 2 times against Missouri, is getting set quick in the play clock and making sure that nothing gets behind them, because Missouri kind of lives on those long, deep balls down the field. Muschamp said they're going to take 10 or 12 shots Saturday. That's just a given. So if they can limit what they're doing in terms of downfield stretching, then that gives South Carolina a little bit more of an edge, because then Missouri has to run the ball a little bit more and they can stack the box. And it's going to come down to one-on-one coverage down the field. It's Rashad Fenton and Keyshawn Nixon and J.C. Horn, and the safeties can really control what those receivers are doing. And it's going to make it really hard for Drew Lock to be able to do really anything. And the 4-man pass rush is another huge thing. If you can get to him and make him uncomfortable, he's not going to have enough time to throw down the field. So defensively, easier said than done, obviously, but I think that's the key when you're looking at, trying to beat a guy like Drew Lock.
Muschamp summed up his statement or his message to the team after the Kentucky game to the media today. He said, we're telling the team, let's do simple better. And I thought that was interesting, Collyn, and that's really the easiest way to kind of correct some of the mistakes that South Carolina made in that Kentucky game. Nobody liked the way things went against Kentucky, so I think it's been a challenge for Muschamp to look ahead to Missouri, given the fact that there were so many problems in that Kentucky game.
Right, and even he said that they're kind of simplifying what they're doing defensively to make sure players aren't worried too much about, doing complex things in the defense, that they're kind of making it a bare bones thing enough to give the quarterback some interesting looks, and then kind of going on from there. So, they're trying to make sure that it's as simple as possible. That way players can focus on getting lined up right and then making the tackle. So I don't think you're going to see anything crazy moving forward. But, they're just trying to make things as simple as possible to make sure players aren't trying to do too much when they get on the field.
All right, one other important item today, Collyn, that we probably should have touched on earlier in today's podcast. Muschamp was asked about the possibility of Bentley not playing on Saturday and where that left the Gamecocks at quarterback. So we talked about Michael Scarnecchia. Said Scarnecchia made some good throws in the Coastal Carolina game, particularly that touchdown pass to Drake Davis. But he mentioned that Scarnecchia has just not had a lot of opportunity in game situations. And, of course, DeCarrion Joyner came up, and Muschamp mentioned that he got reps with the first team on Tuesday's practice.
Right, and I think that's a big thing of just, if Bentley's not able to go, I think you're going to want to have multiple looks to confuse the defense. But, they have faith in Michael Scarnecchia, and Muschamp said that the offense really doesn't change a whole lot than if Bentley was in there. And then with Joyner, they said that they're going to tailor it, if he's in, to what he does well, which is really moving around and moving the pocket a little bit. So I think that it's not out of the realm of possibility to see a Joyner package this weekend. And I think that if Bentley can't go, then the Joyner package becomes that much more of a possibility.
And with the new redshirt rule, Collyn, Joyner can still play in 4 games in redshirt.
Yeah, and he hasn't played yet this season, so he still has 4 games he can play in. And you're slowly running out of games. You only have 7 more. So, so I think that, if South Carolina's offense struggles a little bit down the stretch, then the closer you get to the end of the season, the more likely you are to see something new and different from that offense.
All right, very good. Noon kickoff Saturday for South Carolina, Missouri at Williams-Brice. Collyn, not a lot of talk about Missouri at the presser today. It was mostly about the Gamecocks.
Yeah, and I think that, South Carolina is trying to fix a lot of issues that they saw in that Saturday game, Saturday's game against Kentucky. And, I think they know what they're getting out of Missouri, a pass-happy team that can run the ball when it needs to and does some things well defensively. But I think everything's kind of shaping up, and I think they might think it too, to be kind of somewhat of a shootout with, South Carolina or Missouri needing to make a stop on defense late to win that football game.
Gamecock cornerback Rashad Fenton leads the SEC in interceptions, and Muschamp talked about him a little bit today, was asked about him by one member of the media, and Muschamp said that Missouri is going to take 10 or 12 shots deep downfield, and they're just going to throw the 50-50 ball and see what happens. And Fenton and the rest of the Gamecock secondary will have to continue to play well this weekend against Missouri. Noon kickoff Saturday on the SEC Network at Williams-Brice. Thanks very much, Collyn.
Thank you for having me.
That's Collyn Taylor, our staff writer, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for being with us.